Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Financial Coaches Podcast. I, Maria, and Cody are excited to be here with you today. We're going to talk about time management, which I'm so glad that Cody's going to impart his wisdom on us, because Lord knows I could use some of that wisdom today. But before we jump into that, I would just like to remind all you fantastic listeners, if you have not yet left a rating or a review for us, we would really appreciate you doing that. It just helps spread the word and get this podcast into the ears and eyes of other people who are needing to hear this information that we have to share. And I also want to remind you that we are connecting with you in our Facebook group. It is called New Money Habits Financial Coaches. If you've heard about that group here on this podcast, we encourage you to go find us on Facebook, tell us where you heard about us, and let us know where you are in your business so we can help you. We can meet you where you are and help you from there. Cody, tell me how to manage my time, will you?
Well, let's see. I don't know if I have the time for this. I'm just kidding. So I guess let me actually ask you this question first. What is your biggest struggle with time management?
Oh, you're for real. You're just gonna unpack this right here with me today, aren't you?
Let's do it.
Okay. I think part of my biggest struggle is not being able to anticipate what life is going to throw at me.
Okay. So every day is a little bit different. Right?
Every day is, yes. I wear many hats, and sometimes they fly off in the wind.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Now, do you find that your day changes like throughout the day? Like maybe you start the day with like a plan and then it just totally changes?
Sometimes, and that would require me to start the day with a plan. So I'm just going to be very vulnerable with you right now, very transparent, and let you know that this has been a long time struggle of mine. I kind of get into a groove where I'm like, I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna time, block, and I'm gonna have this plan. And so sometimes that works, but oftentimes it does get a little bit messed up, and then it's very easy to fall into that thinking of, well, that didn't work, so go back to haphazard planning in life and all of that. So
yeah, well, I think that that variable day and even just like not really having days not be the same is super normal, especially for people who are either coaching full time or people who are building it up on the side, but they also have another job, they have families, they have commitments, they have all these different types of things that, like you said, many hats to juggle. Right?
Yep.
And getting better with your time management is not something that, it's not like just like this formula to where you're like, I'm going to do this tomorrow and all my problems will be solved. Right.
Mm-hmm. Like anything.
No, it's something, this is something that takes time, it's something that takes trying and, adjusting and trying again and adjusting again. And then eventually you kind of build a new skill, a new muscle, to where things become pretty predictable, I would say. So as far as time management goes, I really like to pride myself on that. I am the type of person that's like, hey, if you're on time, you're late. If you're 5 minutes early, you're on time. And if you're 10 minutes early, then that's what you're actually looking for, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. My husband would really, really like you.
Yeah. Yeah. Except for parties. If you're 30 minutes late, then you're on time.
Got it.
All right.
So much for no formula.
Right. So I do a few things that I have found really, really help me. The biggest thing that helps me is that I plan my day before the day actually begins. So one of the last things that I do, which I put it in my calendar, is I make my calendar for the next day before the day begins. Mm-hmm.
I love that you just put that into your calendar.
Yep.
Yeah, that is one habit that I've gotten much better with, because I do try to take incremental steps. As much as I say on here that I don't know any of it, I have taken some incremental steps, and that is one of them. I have become very consistent with, if there's an appointment, or even if I need to take my daughter somewhere, she's got a class or something, I have figured out how to put that on the calendar. I color code it so that if it's for my business, it's one color. If it's for my daughter, it's a different color. If it's for, something I just need to be reminded of, a lot of times I will actually block that time off, but make it a different color. So I have gotten good at that. I have never, ever actually put in on my calendar time to plan the next day's time though. So that's a really great idea.
It's crucial. It's crucial because if you don't put that in your calendar, then you'll forget. And then the next day will come and then you'll wake up and you'll be like, oh crap, what am I supposed to do today? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you just start, like, the day just starts happening and it just kind of gets away from you. And all of a sudden it's, 1:00 in the afternoon and you're just like, well, there goes my whole morning, like that kind of thing. Right.
Right. Yep.
So I have found that putting it in your calendar the night before is really, really big. That's the first thing. Then from there, I do something which you mentioned, it is something called time blocking, which is essentially budgeting for your time. If you were to look at it as like a zero-based budget, it's basically the same thing. Like, you're basically zeroing out your time for the entirety of the day, from the moment that you wake up to the moment that you plan to go to bed. Now, just like some people might look at budgeting and be like, well, that's restrictive and I can't do what I want. No, it's the opposite. It's actually very freeing. You can do the things that you want because you're scheduling it in. And there's no guessing, there's no like, what am I going to do or anything like that. It brings you a lot of peace knowing that. So what is time blocking? Time blocking is essentially, you pick a certain block of time and you put a name to it. And you pick the next block of time and you put a name to it. And it's basically using pretty much every minute of every hour, right? Mm-hmm. So for example, if I wake up at 5:30 in the morning and I go to the gym, like in my calendar, I would put 5:30, wake up, get dressed, boom. 6:00, go to the gym. Now that 6:00, that also takes into account the 5-minute drive it takes to get to the gym. Mm-hmm. So my time block for gym is 6 to 7 in the morning, which I work out for 45 minutes at a time. So that, just because it's 45 minutes, it's not 6 to 6:45. No, it's 6 to 7, because that takes into account that 5-minute drive time too, sure, on each end. And it gives me a 5-minute buffer as well. Mm-hmm. Just in case something comes up, traffic, whatever it might be. And then, you just keep that kind of mindset throughout the entire thing. And I even like schedule in like designated times of the day where I take breaks, like in I've talked to people about this before, to where they're like, wait a second, like, you actually schedule in when you're going to take a break and when you're actually just going to like relax. And I'm like, yes, I do. Because if I don't do that, then I'll just keep working. I'll burn myself out. Right. And those breaks are very intentional. Mm-hmm. Like I like, when I'm on my break or my relax time, I'm not doing anything. Just sitting on the couch, watching The Office, scrolling through TikTok, whatever it might be, whatever I need to do to just kind of like recharge my brain and just relax my body. And those are very intentional and they're strategic too, because I'll often schedule those like, maybe like a 20 to 30 minute relax time right before I have a client. So for example, we're wrapping up this recording, and then I have another client at 3:30, and from 3 to 3:30, what's in my calendar? Relax. Mm-hmm. That's it. So I can get recharged from this and show up for my client the best way possible. But essentially what time blocking is you just take those blocks of time and you put a name to it. Mm-hmm. And you you want to ensure that you have that buffer in there too. That's where a lot of people make mistakes with time blocking, is like they'll just block the time, they'll do the thing, but they won't allow any sort of buffer time, like whether it be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes on either end, they don't allow that. So they just go, and they get super burnt out. But if you allow that buffer time, then the things don't seep into each other, right? And then that's when things seep into each other, then you get behind schedule. And then once you get behind schedule, you're like, I might as well just stop doing these things and just, watch The Office or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm chuckling because I've been following your obsession with The Office.
I've actually never seen The Office.
Oh, really? Oh, that's hilarious. I didn't realize it was all a joke.
Yeah.
That's funny. That's even funnier. Okay. Well, that just goes to show you can't believe everything you see on social media. Here's the thing. So I've done time blocking, but very high level. And by high level, I don't mean like expert level. I mean like framework, like not in the nitty gritty. I've done it broadly. When I was time blocking, and I still do this, it's more about those hats that I wear, right? So I'm allowing myself to, be this person at this time and to, do this role at this time, et cetera, et cetera. And I will absolutely agree with what you said about it being freeing. That part was so freeing to me because it allowed me to feel no guilt in putting away this hat while I was wearing this hat, right? Mm-hmm. However, I think where I definitely get tripped up, and it's just right back to your question at the beginning, was not being able to plan some of what life throws at you. So, when you talk about a zero-based budget, you can talk about buffers, right? Just like you did with the time blocking. Mm-hmm. And you also talk about peace of mind or emergency fund. So, some reserves over here so that when life goes not according to plan, because it never will go according to plan, then you've got something there. I haven't yet figured out, full disclosure, how to put aside some reserves of time for when life doesn't go the way I said. So, for example, if I have it in my calendar that I'm going to wear the worker hat, well, let's describe a part-time job. So I'm going to put the part-time job hat on. And then in walks my 3-year-old who needs help wiping. Like all of a sudden, like there's no one else around the house that's able to put that hat on. So I get to put the wiping hat on. That's always fun. It's stuff like that I think really starts to then just become very discouraging, I think is probably the best word for that. I know that my husband, like he's able to go away to work. And so it's a lot easier to say, I'm going to, time block this and I'm going to do this. And then everything, he doesn't have as many of those distractions. So I think that's probably where the biggest thing is. So what do you have to say for some of those distractions? And yours might not be the same at this point, but I'm sure, everyone has those little life distractions that come in. Either how do you handle those, and or have you figured out a way to put some reserves away, time reserves?
Yeah. So I want to go in two different directions with this. First of all, if you're working on something, maybe you're like building a project or whatever it might be, and your 3-year-old needs some help, you got to do what you got to do. Mm-hmm. And that's just what it is.
And I do, by the way.
Yeah.
She's not running around with a dirty little bottom, just for the record.
Right.
It does distract your mind, though. It distracts my mind. And then it takes a lot to rev back up and get mm-hmm. back into that space, right?
Yeah. So what I have done in those situations, so say I have like an hour and a half to where like I'm building, a course or a lead magnet or whatever it might be. And something happens with my baby to where like the babysitter needs help or something like that. I'll pop out, I'll help for 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it might be. and then I'll come back into my office and try and get back to it. Now you're right. Like it does create that disconnect. It's hard to ramp back up. So I have just found that like when that happens, I don't just try and just jump right back into it. I take 5 minutes and I throw in my headphones and I either throw on like a song that's going to get me like really pumped up. I throw on like this, like, like a motivational speech that's going to get me like in the right mindset. And I literally just like walk in circles in my office. I like jump up and down. I shake my arms loose, like all those different types of things. I breathe deeply. And then once the song is done, I sit down and I just get right back into it. Rather than having it be like I'm going right back into it immediately. It's something that kind of like primes me to get back into it. That's the one thing that I have done that has helped me, address those distractions when they do happen, because they do happen.
Yeah.
They happen to me too.
So would you say then, Cody, that if you wanted to write for an hour and a half, that you would just fill in half-hour buffer there? Is that what you would do? So you'd create a 2-hour time block for yourself, or are you creating a 1.5-hour time block, knowing that approximately an hour of that, anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes will be dedicated to writing, but you're allowing for that buffer in there, different than the driving buffer, right?
Yeah. Because, when you have that 30-minute buffer, right? Let's say that something does happen. Cool. You can use that buffer and you're not really thrown off.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't happen, then you can take that extra 30 minutes and you can just reapply it to something else. Right. Or you can, find something to do for the next 30 minutes to where you're like, okay, like I got this extra 30 minutes. I'm going to continue being productive, or I'm going to take a well-deserved break, or whatever it might be, but having that buffer is huge. That's where a lot of people make the mistakes with time blocks, is that they don't give themselves the ability to have those variables come up and potentially throw them off. But if you have that there, then it's like that safety net, So yeah, I mean, I think that's probably the best way that I would address that.
Yeah. And that then creates those time reserves, because if you didn't need it, I mean, at the end of that 60 minutes, for example, maybe it's 75, and so you technically have an extra 15 minutes. I mean, you could continue to write if you wanted to, but you could apply it somewhere else, which is the time reserve. So I think one of the biggest differences between the time and money is, I mean, money, you can always go make more. Time, you can't. So there is that huge difference. Also, with the time reserves, that idea with money, you can accumulate the reserves. With time, you can't, but you can redistribute those reserves.
Yes. So a perfect example of something that happened to me this morning. So this morning from 8 a.m. until 9:30 in my calendar and on my planner, I had that time designated for two things: breakfast and making my rounds. And what I mean by making my rounds is like, touching base with clients, touching base with leads, that kind of stuff, like missed messages, emails, that kind of thing. I put an hour and a half because I knew that I wanted plenty of time to do that. But it only took me an hour. I ended up doing it from 8 to 9. So I took that extra 30 minutes and I basically looked at my next time block, which was 9:30 to 11, which was planned to be that I make a post, I put up a story, and I go out for my second workout of the day. So what I did was I just bumped it up a little bit. I started that at 9 rather than 9:30, which means I wrapped up with everything by like 10:15. So then I had like a 45-minute window before my next time block, which was lunch at 11 o'clock. So from 10:15 to 10:45, I just sat down and I started working on my new lead magnet that I wanted to do, just to get like an extra, an extra leg up on it, essentially. Not something I plan to do. I actually plan to work on my lead magnet later on today. But now I got a little bit more of a head start on it. I can make more progress with it. I could have very well chosen to just have that be a relaxed time. I could have, done several different types of things, but that's just where that's where the practice and the trial and error and the time spent on actually like perfecting and getting your time management in a better place kind of comes, where like you can make those executive decisions of like, hey, if I have this extra time, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah. And one thing I hear in all of that, and it obviously does align very well with what we talk about with money, is the intentionality in terms of if you've got extra, that it's okay to spend that intentionally, but not waste it. So for example, if you had that extra half hour, you said, I could have used that to rest, for example, that's different than squandering it away. If you are just, a lot of times we are busy, if you will, but we're busy doing nothing. we're busy just, literally doing, but nothing. And I think that would be more of a waste of time. Whereas even if it's just resting, if you're doing that with intention, then you have permission to do that. And it's not squandering that time away.
Yeah. And the reason I chose not to relax during that time is because I knew that my next time block was lunch, which is relaxing to me, So
yeah, so
I was like, well, I'm not going to like just like take 2 time blocks essentially and put them together if they're both going to be relaxing.
Right.
Like, I want the time that I have that is downtime to be time that's like actually intentional, and not just like do it just because, know?
Yep.
So yeah. And I think it's different, especially for coaches that are listening to this, where they're saying, okay, well, I have a job, and not just a job, but I also have a family as well. How do I even begin to try and do this time blocking thing when I work and I have a family and I'm trying to do this business on the side and all these different types of things? Well, I was there too. For anyone who's listened to this podcast, they know that I only went full time with coaching. Well, I guess it's actually coming up on a year now, almost about 10 months ago.
Exciting.
Yeah. But for the first like year to year and a half of my coaching practice, I was working, I had a family, and this was something that I was building up on the side. Now I still took that same principle of like schedule out my day before the day begins. And I when you work on top of trying to build the business on the side, it's just one of those things to where you just need to put in the time. And it's tiring and it's a lot of work. But if this is something that you want to do to build up to eventually go full time, then it's just something you have to do.
Are you saying you have to spend time to make time?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So having like a morning routine is super, super important. And, going to bed earlier rather than like sitting and watching Netflix for 2 hours at the end of the night. Like, why don't you just do it for 30 minutes or an hour and then go to bed, or, read a book for 30 minutes or an hour and then go to bed and save that extra hour. Maybe instead of going to bed at 11, you go to bed at 10, or instead of going to bed at 10, you go to bed at 9. So you can get up earlier, do your morning routine, maybe do some like post work for your clients, or make your rounds like I was talking about before you go into the office. You go into the office, you do your work, you come home, you spend a little bit of time with the family, you make dinner, you have some time with the kids, whatever it might be. And then maybe from like, 6 to 8:30, then you're working with clients or something like that. Right. It's going to be a lot of work, but if you use that time blocking, it makes the work more possible.
Let me ask you this, Cody. For somebody who's just starting out on this and they're not able to go all in, what do you suggest? Do you suggest something like, just pick a specific thing, kind of like with the envelope system? Someone's like, I'm not ready to go all cash. And so, we might walk them through the process of choosing the category that causes the most frustration for them. And they just do cash for that category. So I'm kind of trying to draw just similarities between these two things. For this, would you suggest that somebody take something and just try the time blocking? Do they have permission to do that? Where will it work if they just do a small amount, or do you have to start all in order for it to actually create any value for somebody just starting?
Well, just based off of my personality, I think that all in is the way to go.
Yes.
But I also know that, it does take some easing into it as well. So, maybe someone has a job and they get off at 5 and they know that, 5 to 6:30 is like their family time where they have dinner, they spend time with their family, whatever. Then, and then maybe afterwards they work with some clients. Cool. Like just start time blocking from when you get off work until you go to bed, because even if you were to do that, then you're being intentional with your time with your family.
Right.
You're being intentional with your time with your clients, and you're being intentional with your time by going to bed.
Yeah. Yep. And
so
that's exactly
you can
what,
then get up.
Yes, exactly.
And do it all over again.
Exactly.
That's the biggest thing is going to bed. Like I have a bedtime, 9:30. That's my bedtime. I'm an old man, right? I am in bed by 9:30 pretty much every day. If not before, and it just depends on the day. But it's very rare that I'll stay up past 9:30 because I know that I have to get up at 5:30 because I have my next day planned out. And I just know that if I stay up until 11 or 12 binge watching Stranger Things, that while I might love it in the moment, I'm not going to love it the next day. And it's really going to take a toll on me.
Yeah.
So even if you start with like that one section, once you get off of work until you go to bed, I think that's going to be a huge, huge start.
I do too. And one thing that I would be remiss if I didn't bring up before we wrap up here is boundaries. As we were talking, I've been hearing a lot about boundary setting throughout this whole thing. And when you mentioned, if this hour and a half is for your family, then we time block that. I want to focus in on that for just a minute to prove my point. If you time block that hour and a half for your family, and you are still checking your phone for messages or for emails or, on Facebook, so that you're, checking your interaction on your posts or whatever, you're not there with your family. And they know that and they feel that. And so when they're asked to leave you alone for the next hour and a half so you can be with your clients, they're not likely to respect that boundary either. However, if you are blocking that time and you're saying, this is my family time, and you literally are only focusing on the family, you put the devices away, you don't try to come up with the next podcast episode, you don't try to come up with what's your next post going to be, you really are just in the moment. That's, I think, where that guilt goes away when you are then saying, you know what, I've given you this time, and now I need you to allow me to be with these individuals for this time. I think where the guilt comes in is when we know we didn't give them that time fully and authentically, and then we are then taking that time away some more. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that because it is such an important thing. I think that's where the freeing comes from with the time blocking, is it gives you permission to not do all of the things at once. But it does take some responsibility in actually focusing on the thing that you said you were going to focus on.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. If you were in a session with a client, would you feel comfortable inviting your family in to have dinner while you're taking that session, like in the same room as you?
No.
Why not?
Well, for the privacy of the client, first of all. And also because, you know how hard it is for me to stay focused anyway. I can barely think for myself these days. I would have a really hard time not being distracted by my family and not being able to focus on that individual.
Right. So if you would never do that to a client, then why would you ever do that to your family? If you have a designated time for your family, just like you have a designated time for your clients, and you would never do that to your clients, then why is it that we find ourselves doing that to our family, the ones that we really love the most, the ones that really matter to us the most, you know?
Yeah.
So that's just my way of saying like what you just said is absolutely right. You know, like setting that boundary, not only with your family or with your clients, but also with yourself, knowing that like, hey, like this is my family time and I'm not going to feel guilty about it because this is a part of my plan. This is a part of my journey and this is a part of my calendar. And that's just it, you know? And when you ask your family to give you that respect and that time to work with your clients, you also need to ask your clients to do the same when you're with your family.
Right.
So yeah, that's just my way of like, you know, doing a different perspective, I guess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that if we don't need permission from other people to set those boundaries. However, I think that if we share those boundaries and that information with people around us, it then releases us from any of that explanation later as well. You know, if we say to whoever it is, whether it's it could be clients, but it could also be extended family members. It could be anybody, somebody who's going through a crisis. You know, if we say, I really want to help you, I can't answer the phone during this time to this time. Right? Then they know ahead of time that it's not them. It's not that you're not willing to help or that you're not in a position to be able to do that. It's just that you're modeling for your kids and for whoever you're doing this with, how to have a healthy boundary and what that really looks like and how that actually benefits not just you, but everybody else involved as well.
Yeah. Yeah. One big thing that people ask me, especially if they're like newer clients, they'll say, you know, can we meet on Sunday or whatever it might be? I tell them, I'm like, nope. Sundays are the only day that I do not work. That is a family day. So I'm sorry, but we cannot meet that day. And I also tell my clients, all my clients know, if they were to shoot me a message or a question or a text or a call or whatever, and it happens to fall on a Sunday, they know that they're not hearing from me. Period. Like they just know that. And my family also knows that I am not doing any work on Sunday. Yeah. And you know what? I've never had someone say, well, that's just not going to work for me. I've never had someone say that to me. You know what they always say? They say, okay.
Yeah. And
Sounds
you're
good.
modeling that good behavior for them. It really is important. And you didn't say, no, you can't shoot me a message on Sunday. Right?
Nope.
You just said, here's the expectation. Here's what you can expect from me. And so it just gives them a heads up on what that expectation is. And they know that it's not because you're not willing to be helpful and that you don't know the answer or that you're stalling for time. They know that this is not the day that you work. And so for all of those reasons, I think it's just such an important piece. And I'm glad that you allowed me to share that piece of it, because without that, the time blocking thing can seem very formulaic. It can seem, like it's just the number part of the budget. But when we add in the boundary part, the relationship part of it, then it's kind of like adding in the value side of our clients' budgets as well. So it's definitely more holistic. So I appreciate you letting me do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So to wrap things up, basically the 4 takeaways that I'm hearing is as we were talking about everything. 1 is to plan your day before it begins. 2 is to use the time blocking method. 3 is to have those buffers, basically that peace of mind fund for your time, to ensure that things don't butt up against each other and you don't just like run into this mess of time essentially. And 4 is to set and hold those boundaries, whether it be with your family, with your clients, or even with yourself. I think that's a really key important part as well. So
that's a great summary of the discussion we had, Cody. Thanks so much for doing that.
Hey, that's why I'm here.
It's why I need you. You guys, thanks so much for tuning in this week. We hope that you too were able to get at least those 4 takeaways and maybe some others. If you got some others, feel free to let us know what those are in that group that we mentioned earlier, the New Money Habits Financial Coaches group on Facebook. We'd love to see you there. And again, we appreciate you tuning in today. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our host by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching. Music provided by Summer School.